Hello YouTubers, here's a quick look at the Metrobolist CD, which is the 2020 remix of The Man Who Sold the World by David Bowie, as well as the accompanying Width of a Circle 2 CD set. So here is Metrobolist. It is in a little mini LP replica jacket, very similar to the ones that were in the 5 Years and Other Eras box sets, but this uses the original cover with the original title of The Man Who Sold the World. Lyrics are printed on the back, and then we have photos from the photo session of Bowie wearing the dress with the playing cards that was on the original UK cover. The inside is the small inner sleeve. No plastic bag this time, funnily enough, unlike the Eras box sets. There's a quote from David Bowie about the cover, and then the disc itself just has the Philips logo, but with Bowie written there instead. And here is the Width of a Circle set. So this is one of those DVD size book style cases. It's not as big as the other box sets in this archival series because there just wasn't enough material to merit more discs. So there's only 2 CDs with the complete track listing on the back. But the book itself, though smaller, is very similar to the books that are with Conversation Piece, Rock and Roll Star, etc., with a timeline, quotes from David Bowie, pictures of his lyric sheets, as well as a rundown of everything that's on the box set, when it was recorded, and the context behind it, etc., etc. So, very similar style to what the other box sets in the series are like, just smaller. And then we have the discs at the back, just 2 CDs. Again, same Philips style orange disc as the Metrobolist CD. So that's Metrobolist and The Width of a Circle. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. I'm Brandon Ware. You're watching Angel65, my channel for all things music related, both music reviews and my own individual music posts. Today we are talking about Metrobolist and The Width of a Circle by David Bowie. So this is the remix by Tony Visconti of The Man Who Sold the World album, and then this is an accompanying 2 CD set which covers some of his non-studio development during that same period. So let's start with Metrobolist, or rather The Man Who Sold the World itself. This is an album that I've always been very fond of. It's one of my favorites by Bowie, especially from his earlier period. In fact, I prefer it to all 3 of the albums which followed it, just because it's heavier, it's more aggressive, the lyrics are more, how should I say, philosophical. It says Nietzschean in the book, and that's kind of hard to disagree with. I just love the mixing, I love the production on it, I love how aggressive it is. And hot take, I really, really, really love Tony Visconti's bass playing, and I prefer it significantly to Trevor Bolder's bass playing. I think he's a fantastic bassist, and I also think his production and mixing on the album is phenomenal. Unfortunately, the album was not a joyous experience to make for Bowie, and so that led to them severing their relationship until they reconvened later on to remix Diamond Dogs and then make Young Americans. So I guess their relationship ended badly at the time because this was a difficult album to make. And while that is unfortunate, I think it shows in comparison to the 3 albums after it, which we will talk about as I move through this box set series. But I like this one significantly better, and I think it sounds significantly better because Visconti was such a perfectionist, and he worked really hard to make sure that it was recorded well and sounded aggressive, which is something that I very much enjoy. The original mix definitely is a bit flat. It's lacking a little bit of character. It's a very straight, on-the-face mix. There's obviously some reverb and effects and things that happen, like at the very beginning of the opening track, Width of a Circle. But overall, it's a pretty dry mix, and you could argue that it is a little bit hollow sounding. So as he did with the Space Oddity album, he's gone back to these original tapes and he's just added some more flavor, some more character, definitely some more low end to him, and just given this album even more punch than it previously had. I certainly don't think this remix was as necessary as the Space Oddity album, which probably wasn't recorded super well to begin with, except for that track itself, Space Oddity. But overall, I still enjoyed this mix quite a bit. I probably would say I prefer it to the original. 8 of the 9 tracks were remixed. After All is actually the original version because Visconti said he didn't think he could improve upon it. But all of the other 8 tracks have been remixed, and overall I think they sound punchier and more aggressive. So the album itself has always been one of my favorites, and The Width of a Circle, the opening track, I think is just fantastic. I think it's a great way to introduce Mick Ronson to the Bowie album catalog. It's not the first track he played on with Bowie, but it sounds great. Visconti's bass sounds great, and the drums sound pretty big and full. They did sound a little bit rickety on the original album. They have more ambience and character to them on this remix. And overall, remix or no, they sound much better than the drums on Hunky Dory and especially Ziggy Stardust, where I don't think the drums sound very good at all. So overall, I'm a big fan of this record. My favorite track on it is The Width of a Circle, but I certainly love the title track. I love Savior Machine. I really love the Superman, and I prefer the version that's on here to all of the other versions that are recorded, spread across the various box sets that we'll talk about in the coming videos. Black Country Rock is cool. If there's any tracks that I kind of don't like, it's probably She Shook Me Cold and Running Gun Blues. Those ones just don't speak to me that much. But After All the Madmen, fantastic. All the Madmen is, of course, infamous for Zayn 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 Ouvre Le Chien, which he used again at the end of Buddha of Suburbia over 20 years later. So, neat little phrase that is. I would highly recommend checking this album out, and if you don't own any previous copies of it, if you're new to the Bowie camp, then this is a great place to start, because I actually prefer this cover artwork to the original, and I prefer the mix to the original. But the original sounds good too. My original is limited to the copy in the 5 Years box set, which sounds great, but I definitely prefer this remix to that. Overall, this is one of my favorite periods in Bowie's history, with his backing band, The Hype, which is almost the Spiders, except for Visconti. Initially, John Cambridge was on drums, and then Woody Woodmansey came in. So here's The Width of a Circle, which is effectively the bonus archival material from this same period. So the discs are organized in a bit of a mishmash way in order to make everything fit on 2 CDs, which I'm fine with. So the first disc, the entire first disc, is The Sunday Show, introduced by John Peel, recorded on 5th February 1970, and this is a 14-song set. Unfortunately, the BBC did not retain the original master tapes, and so this is not the highest quality recording. It comes from an off-air cassette recording that Visconti himself made. The first 4 tracks are completely acoustic, and then the rest of the band comes in throughout the set. The main focus of the set is all the tracks from the first album, or I suppose the second album, David Bowie, with the exception of Space Oddity. That one he chooses not to perform here, instead opting for the rest of the album tracks, including the full-length Signet Committee, which is really cool live. I actually prefer it to the original album version. And then we get some of the additional B-side re-recorded type tracks like London by Ta-Ta. We get Buzz the Fuzz, which is an additional Biff Rose composition. And then we get Amsterdam, which is something he performed a lot in that period. God Knows I'm Good. Proto versions of The Width of a Circle, which is very different to how it finally did end up when it was recorded for the album. Cool stuff. You get The Prettiest Star, because he released that as a single, and it didn't do anything. This is long before it was re-recorded for the Aladdin Sane album. And then disc 2, there's 4 different kinds of things included on disc 2. The first 5 tracks are the Looking Glass Murders, aka Pierrot and Turquoise, which is basically a reboot of the mime performance that kind of brought him back into music with Lindsay Kemp, but I guess the songs are different than the songs that were used in the original version. Except for When I Live My Dream, but everything else was newly composed. Columbine, Harley Quinn. Threepenny Puro is actually just a rewrite of London by Tata, same melody, same chords, different lyrics. And then When I Live My Dream, Reprise. According to the book, there is a visual version of this that was released on DVD, and so here's where I start to express some frustration with this and the following sets in this series, where it's, if it was released on DVD and there's a visual component, then why wasn't it included in this? Yes, it would have necessitated an additional disc, or perhaps they could have just turned this whole set into a single Blu-ray audio with everything included on these two CDs and on a Blu-ray, as well as the visual component of that Threepenny Puro and Turquoise. Very odd that they would choose not to include that. I might seek that out. I'm not super interested in those recordings, so I don't know if I would pay tons of money to watch that, but it is it's a shame that it wasn't included here. Then we get the singles. The Prettiest Star alternative mix, which is not the same version that went out on the single. It's an alternate mix that I guess was created for the US market and then ultimately shelved. London by Tata, which was never released. That single was shelved as well. An alternative stereo mix of that created in 1970. And then we get the single version of Memory of a Free Festival, Parts 1 and 2, which is the closing track on the David Bowie Phillips album. Split in half, but it still features Mark Bolan, which I think the original did as well. So it's just a more electric band version. And I certainly prefer it to the originals. And it's the first commercially released recordings with Mick Ronson on guitar. Then we get a second BBC session, Sounds of the 70s, Andy Ferris show, recorded on March 25th. We get the first live performance of Waiting for the Man. Sorry, not live, BBC studio performance. We get a more complete Width of a Circle, though it's still different from the final album version. And then we get Wild Eyed Boy from Free Cloud and a proto version of the Superman. And then the final 5 tracks are the 2020 mixes, which is effectively the singles just remixed by Tony Visconti. So we get Prettiest Star, London by Tata, Memory of a Free Festival. The 2 parts are combined into a single track for that. All the Mad Men, the single edit, which was ultimately never released. The original mix that was done, which I believe is the same as the original Man Who Sold the World album mix, it was just edited, is included on the Recall compilation in 5 years. So this is a remix of that same edit. I believe it's the same remix of that's on this Metrobolist, just edited to the original single length for the single that never was. And then we end with Holy Holy, the original version, recorded with Blue Mink, Herbie Flowers, who he would use again later on Diamond Dogs. The original version, this is not the Spiders version. So that's what's on this set. And overall, for the price and the packaging, this is probably my favorite style of packaging. I really love these little DVD-size book-style cases. They're just simple, to the point. They can still have a decent amount of text and information in them, but they're not big, they're not bulky. They don't take up a ton of space and have a bunch of uninteresting details in them. Overall, I can't see it as fair to give this anything less than a 5 out of 5, even though it is lacking the visual component of Puro and Turquoise, which I certainly would be interested in seeing, and it would have been nice if it were here. Overall, for 2 CDs that cover what I think is one of his most interesting transition periods with his band The Hype, and leading up to the end of his first run of recordings with Tony Visconti, it's a very interesting historical document. It's just a shame that there's not more in here, but I believe they basically included everything they can, and that's why this one was done as a smaller style volume as opposed to conversation piece and then the following 2 box sets, because there just isn't that much here of his band, The Hype. So basically everything that can be included is included. And overall, the sound quality is decent. That show on disc 1 doesn't sound the best, and there's some dropouts and some interference, but overall, I mean, it still sounds totally listenable, and not unlistenable, not distorted beyond belief or anything like that. And most of the recordings on disc 2 seem to sound pretty good as well. As for the 2020 mixes here, the single tracks that are included are none of them are particularly interesting to me in the first place, except perhaps London by Tata. So the remix versions, they didn't do much for me. They sound better than the originals, but I wouldn't say I prefer them because the songs in general are just not songs that I'm particularly interested in. All of the singles here were either re-recordings or would be re-recorded later, namely The Prettiest Star and Holy Holy would be re-recorded later. So, strange transitional year for Bowie as he's moving from one record contract to the next, is working with Tony Visconti for the last time for 4 years, and is aiming for a hit single but just did not get one that year. So this is a very interesting transitional period. If you're interested in the history of that and hearing basically all of the hype recordings that are available, then I certainly recommend this. If I would not pay more than $30 for this, even $30 I think is a bit steep. $25 is probably a fair price, which I believe is what I paid for it. Overall, good set, worth checking out. Not as worth checking out as the remix of Man Who Sold the World, Metrobolist, though. This, I would say, is an absolute necessity for Bowie fans, whether you're a big fan of this period or not. I certainly am, but even if you're not, I definitely think this is worth checking out because it just brings more power to the original mix and shows Bowie at his heaviest. This is probably his heaviest album in a lot of ways, at least until the 90s when he started going more industrial, but he certainly wouldn't get this heavy again during the 70s. Alright, Metrobolist gets a 5 out of 5, Width of a Circle gets a 5 out of 5, both very simple sets, and they definitely complement each other when listened to as a pair of releases. Tell me what you think in the comments. Have you heard these? What do you think? That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Bye.